So I added the first item to the agenda, but it's actually more of a question for Sean. Came up into our one-on-one, and I was wondering how we are going, like what the automation for getting information from Timeland into the issues is eventually going to look like. I know we start with issues created from the alerts through Alert Manager, Thanos and Alert Manager. And then what happens from there, because I know you're adding like metadata file to Timeland from our metrics catalog, but that's kind of like still a little bit of unknown.
Yeah. So I guess there are two broad streams for what I'm doing. So one is on the Timeland side and the other one is on the GitLab side. So the way it works right now is that Timeland gets information from Thanos, does some data science work on it, produces a GitLab Pages site and sends alerts via Alert Manager. So those alerts from Alert Manager, their target endpoint is within GitLab in gitlab.com using our alert management feature. And then those go into the alerts in the capacity planning project. And then we use the alert management feature there to create incident issues. We talked before about the alert management UI. I got some feedback from the team that works on that, and they are actually making some of the improvements we needed there, like the ability to annotate why you're resolving an alert, stuff like that. But still, for our purposes, like we mostly want to work from incidents, which are basically issues, rather than alerts, because we can put incidents on a board. We can easily link incidents to other issues. You know, all the stuff that we normally do in our day-to-day works on incidents. There's a feature in GitLab that lets you automatically create an incident from an alert every time a new alert is created. We turned that on, then we got a bunch of duplicate incidents, so we turned it off. The team have told me that the deduplication for alerts actually works like we expected it to. The problem was, and what I'm just about to fix today now, Bob's approved the MR, is that we also had resolved notifications set up in Alert Manager for this channel. And so Timeland was sometimes resolving these alerts. And then when a new alert is created that matches a resolved alert, GitLab won't reopen the resolved alert. It will create a new alert that will then have alert events grouped into that new alert, which I think makes sense. And Timeland can resolve things, for instance, because it only shows the top 15. Is it top 15? Most
saturated.
Risk. Yeah, exactly. So if something is still at risk, but not in the top 15, that can get a resolved thing you sent, even though it might come back next week, depending on like other things changing. And that's another question that you got pointed out yesterday when I was talking, when we were talking about that, was we should probably send alerts for all of them, not just the top 15, even if we only display the top 15, because they're still at risk of saturation. But yeah, that's one side of that. So basically what we want to do is not use the alert management UI in GitLab at all, and just work from a board that automatically gets issues put onto it by Timeland running and creating alerts, which then get turned into incidents and that don't duplicate each other. And then we just work on that board. We are still figuring out exactly how we manage that board. So, am I assigned to the issue because I am looking at the capacity planning part of it? Is the person who's working on that potentially in a different issue, like, in the reliability tracker, also assigned to this capacity planning issue? Are we both? Like, we're not 100% sure yet. And then the other thing is about closing those issues for the same reason I just mentioned about the resolved alert. Sometimes we will fix a capacity issue, but Timeland won't spot that for a couple of weeks because like it's projecting based on, the history of what's happened. And, if that's spiky, it might say, well, there's a reasonable chance that this could spike again in future. I'll just see if I can find an example of that to show.
The way that, while you're looking for that example, the way that you described that there, it sounds like at some point we wouldn't actually go to Tamland at all in terms of looking at stuff. We would only ever be looking at that board.
Possibly, yes. So here's an example with Redis sessions. So I think we had an incident with Redis with session expiry times a while ago, a few weeks ago, and you can see that very clearly here. Obviously, that's not a good incident for Tamland because Tamland's good for things that are saturating slowly. Like, it's possible that this could have hit saturation before the Tamland report was run because it's once a week.
But the same metrics alerted. Like,
yes, exactly. We do have alerts, short-term alerts for these, short burn rate, I guess. So we can see that we dropped in sort of 2 steps here, and then it's sort of trending down. It's still not quite reached this, so I still need to look into that. But even if we said it's going to go flat from here, it's going to take a little while for Tamland to project that that's going to be flat because it doesn't know what this means. Like, you know, it's a predictive model, right? Like it doesn't have the context of like, oh, this was a bug and then we fixed the bug and now it's back down here. So yeah, so I think we might need to keep that issue open for a while just to, because if we close it and we have the auto create thing, it will get auto created again because it's still projecting that it could saturate in August.
That was my next question. So, if we close an incident, the alert gets resolved?
Yes, I think so. I need to double check that actually. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. But yes, that's a good question. I should double check that. And then another thing we're going to address.
That would then re-trigger and recreate a new issue.
Yeah, so if we was,
but generally we want that, right?
Yeah. So I think technically, even if it does happen, we could close the issue and then reopen the alert. But I don't think we really want to do that either, because then, although we don't really want to use the alert management UI, we'll have a bunch of alerts hanging around in there that are attached to resolved closed incidents. And, you know, it'll be hard.
We can keep the issue in what is the last column of
verification.
Yeah,
verification. I think what you've done in the past, Bob, is just keep it a verification, but set a due date. And I think that's pretty clear that, like, you know, this is open, but we're not doing anything with it right now. We're just waiting for Tamland to catch up with reality. Actually, on that, another thing that we need to address is stuff like this. So Redis cache can't saturate Redis memory because it has max memory and an LRU policy. So, you know, Tamland's projecting this, and this is related to what Matt's looking into, right? Like, we're probably evicting more than we need, so it's bouncing up and down a bit more than it needs to. So it's sort of projecting this confidence interval that leads to saturation. But we don't need that, because basically the only way this can saturate is like this, like almost vertically. Like if the LRU policy...
This also looks a bit odd in the sense that it's hovering around, you know, 60%. And I guess that's because it's based off of the instances memory and not max memory. And we generally, for Redis at least, we want to have a pretty generous ceiling of additional memory. One of the reasons for that being recovery, so that we have the page cache to help with that.
Yeah, it does say Redis memory, which I would have expected to be.
But it's divided by the node total memory,
exactly.
and not by the max memory, which is an artificial setting that we sometimes set.
Because if this was compared to max memory, it would basically all be at 100%, right, for this one. Because we do have a Redis cache service, but a memory resource for just the node metrics, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think for the other Redises, it probably makes sense because we don't set max memory on those, I believe, or do we?
Although we should. Yeah, we talked about this a while ago.
No, we do. We have to. Otherwise we.
Yeah. Otherwise, what? Like, there's no good option when it saturates memory, but like not having max memory is probably the worst option, right? Because then how do we recover? Yes, no, I think you're right. Anyway, sorry, what I was going to say was, like, this can't saturate slowly. Like, there's no way that this is here now and saturates in August, right? Like, with a slow increase along this light blue line. What happens is like either somehow we misconfigure it, so we lose max memory setting, or we set max memory too high, or there's a bug somewhere and it just shoots up basically immediately. Because Redis cache is always running at max memory, like that's the point. And we already have, I think, alerts for that, like regular alerts that will fire in minutes rather than days like Tamland would. So we don't actually need this sort of thing in Tamland at all. And another example of that would be JVM heap size. We had a couple of alerts for that in Tamland for like the logging clusters. But again, JVM heap size, you're always going to be basically at max heap, I'm assuming, after the service has been running for a while. I don't actually know how JVM reclaims memories. That might not be true. But the point is, it could go up to the max heap size, and that's not a problem. And we don't really care about the projections as long as it doesn't exceed the max heap size. So yeah, that's one side of it, is like how we manage it. And then the other side, which Bob was mentioning, is within Tamland itself. So at the moment, Tamland gets all its metadata from Thanos.
Before we go
so
to
like,
the metadata,
oh yeah,
should we have a saturation metric for max memory though? Because for things like shared state and so Redis persistent or Sidekick or yeah, that matters, right?
Yeah, for all of the Redises where we don't rely on eviction, which I'd say is pretty much all of them except for
Cache.
Cache. I mean, we evict on sessions, but we do that only as a last resort. So even there, I think we do want to track the memory saturation. So the question to me would rather be, do we want to exclude it? Like if we don't care about it for cache, do we want to just exclude it for cache specific?
Well, we currently don't have anything that compares the metric that Sean just showed, the Redis memory versus the max memory. So for Redis cache, that would be at around 100%. I'll create an issue for that. Because I think we actually wanted for Redis cache as well. It would be nice if we could rely on natural expiry and like, yeah.
Yeah, and there is a Redis
we don't
config.
though, right?
No, we don't right now. So right now we don't want to alert for it, but someday maybe.
And there is a Redis config max memory metric in there. So yeah, let's just use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. So go ahead.
I had one question / suggestion before we move on. You kind of described the architecture of all of these pieces and how they fit together. Would it be useful to have some kind of architecture diagram for this stuff?
Yes.
I mean, worth considering.
Yes, I can add that to the Tamland README. I had a note for myself there. Yeah, and then so that's what we're doing on the GitLab side, although a bit on the Tamland side. And then the second part is more on the Tamland side. So let me just share again, actually. So there are some little oddities, even if you use the Pages site. Like if I click on this dashboard, I get help that says, for further details, select this dashboard. Wait, what was I on? Redis memory. And then I get the help text. And that's because Tamland at the moment is getting all of its information, including about the metrics catalog itself, from Prometheus, from Thanos. So this is the first dashboard link was like a generated one. And then this one is a more useful one that will actually, you know, have the description that we want. That's helpful. So I had a call with Andrew the other day, and he basically said like this was because it was a proof of concept initially, like, it's not necessarily, we don't, if we want to add more metadata, we don't want to put that in Prometheus. So the idea there is to generate a file from the runbooks. So Tamland has at the moment just a dependency on like all the Python notebook stuff to like generate the reports, and B on Prometheus, Thanos, to get the data and the metadata. We'll be adding a file that has the metadata, and then we'd only depend on Prometheus for the data. So this is going to make it easier to, well, produce useful links within Tamland, but also easier to rearrange what goes on what pages and stuff like that within the pages site, because at the moment it's sort of like manual, like this is this service here, and then this is things excluding this service here. But we don't know what those services are without going out to Thanos. Like if we renamed our Redis services, that's probably a bad example. I will back away from that example because that's not going to happen. But if we change services in a way that Tamland wasn't expecting, that would be not obvious initially. So the idea is to have a static file that we can generate from the runbooks and from the metrics catalog that we can then provide to Tamland either within the repo or like as a CI artifact or a pages file or something. Yeah.
Another example is if we decided to rearrange it so that it was grouped by what's the reliability groups, the
squad,
the team squads, you could, if you decided to rearrange it so that it was grouped by squad or something like that, like you don't have to put that logic into Tamland, you just leave that in the config. Yes,
exactly. And it also means that we don't need to copy and paste the templates between them. Hopefully, I still need to check that like the Jupyter build will actually let us do that, but like we can just use one template and have that filled in with the metadata on each page. So yeah, that's the other thing I'm going to work on. I think that also means at the moment you need Prometheus to like build anything within that project, but I think this means that we could probably say you can build like the navigation on all the pages just without the charts and the actual data if you don't have Prometheus, because we have all the metadata like statically available. So that's like a sort of iteration benefit while you're working on it as well, I think, because even if you set the look back period to be like a day, it still takes a little while to go out to Thanos and collect everything it needs.
Can we make the incident issues richer with that information as well?
Yes, that's the next part. So once I've done that, I was going to look at that. There is so the first part was going to be push more information into the Tamland pages site, and then where possible, push those from the pages site into the issues, because again, was it Igor said earlier, like ideally, we just want to be looking at the incident issue and we want as few clicks as possible from there, essentially. So like the more that is in the incident issue initially, the better. If we then have to go through to the Tamland site, that's kind of okay. But if we have to go through from Tamland to the dashboards and then dashboards to something else, that's, it's not a disaster, but it's getting less ideal. So yeah, we want to push as much possible into the issues so we can ideally work from the board, even if it's just pushing more links into the issues, I guess, because we probably will need to go to the dashboards at some point. So yeah.
Slackline for Tamland.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, some of this stuff would be easier if we weren't using the GitLab feature, but also, it's good for us to dog food the feature. So, yeah.
I was pretty quick to get that starting, I think, to get that started, because, yeah, there was already a dependency. Like Tamland already needed to run on the blessed runners to get to Prometheus anyway, so it also could get to push gateway to do its thing. So
yes, yeah, exactly. Because it runs on ops for that reason, right? Like the actual pages builds.
would be nice if we could get the screenshot from Tamland, like the SVG that it generates onto the.
Yes, actually, that would be a big one, and I do have an issue for that because I mean that's that's basically what I do whenever I open a new issue that doesn't have one. Is go to click the Tamland link, copy the image, paste it into the issue, and then
Does
start working,
GitLab
so.
support SVGs directly? Like if you embed an SVG in a like a link to an SVG at least, does it actually it
Yeah,
shows
it
right?
renders
Yes.
SVGs in
Oh,
line.
cool. That's helpful.
And it also, I'm pretty sure you can use a data URL with a PNG as well if you want to, but that's going to be quite unwieldy if you want to actually
That's
edit the issue
brutal.
description. Yeah, so not necessarily sure I'm recommending that, but yeah. So yeah, that's the sort of two broad things that I'm working on there, and basically the direction Rachel has given me for this is just, so I'm going on parental leave at the start of July, so this is just like, I'm going to do as much as I can on this in June, and then and then I'm done. So that's mainly what I'm going to be working on there.
Yeah,
any more questions on that?
And we'll see we'll see where we're at the end of June, because the reason for giving Sean that direction is just that it's taking a lot of everyone's time right now to try and get through these alerts. And if we're going to be a person down in July with Sean being out, that's even more time that's going to go into capacity planning from fewer people. So anything we can do at the moment to automate this further, I think is going to be helpful. And the stuff that's been talked about today, I think it's going to make quite a big difference in how we process these things. And on the other hand of this, I'm trying to get momentum going for being able to sign these issues straight to the people who are actually responsible with sorting it out. Because for us to do all of the work to resolve everything as well, it just doesn't scale. So the process should be that we raise awareness that something has happened, and then we get the teams on board to resolve it. We just have to figure out who the right teams are and how to get them on board. But that's, if we can get to that point by the end of June, I'll be really happy. So
yeah. we also need like I said, there's also a sort of tracking question as well. If like it's going to take a team like 2 months to fix this, and we predict it'll saturate in 3 months, that's probably okay. But we do need to keep on top of that and make sure that they are fixing that within that time period that they set. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll still have to periodically review the issues. It just means that it goes back to review rather than us actively doing stuff all the time to resolve.
Yes. And one other thing I should have mentioned that's not really in those two streams of work is we're figuring out how we report this in the engineering allocation meeting, like what's the most useful way of doing it, because we could always report what are new potential capacity risks, but a lot of the time those aren't very interesting. So for instance, what was the HA proxy one? Was it HA proxy CPU, single node CPU that we were looking at, Igor? Like the answer there is ask the reliability team to add more HA proxy nodes. So like, you know, we can mention that once, but we don't really want to be telling people about that a lot. It's not particularly exciting. It's just, we need to do this. When we do it, it will be fixed.
My ask there is that we have some sort of like feedback mechanism for issues, or like a fallback process to make sure that you know, if the issue's opened and then it remains open for a month, that that we kind of drive it forward with a manual kind of catch-all at the end of the process. Because
yes,
even
so
in those
like
cases,
A due date.
yeah,
yes, exactly.
a due date.
We need a concept of overdue, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Maybe we should have a due date on all the issues in there, actually. The triage.
That's a great idea.
Definitely.
Some of them are like I for a while I set the due date manually to the first 8% confidence saturation date, but for some things that like the Redis one, that's yeah.
So if we have a due date, then we can get very sort of straightforward about like how we report on that, and we put it maybe into the InfraDev report just as a section of like capacity planning issues that are past the due date, or capacity planning issues that are nearly at the due date and then past, and put that into the report as a like a very, you know, and owning
Then
team or something like that.
Do we set that date as the warning date that is being generated? Do we set it before the warning date?
I think we'd have to set it on a case, like, because potentially an issue would have multiple due dates, right? So like initially it would have the due date of we expect the team to have started work on this by this point. Then it would be we expect the team to have finished work on this by this point, and then it would be we expect this to have dropped off Tamland as a saturation risk by this point, because like I said earlier, that can take a bit longer if it's been a bit spiky or bumpy. Like, you know, the projections will be, the confidence intervals will be quite wide, and so like it can take longer to actually drop off the report.
But I think then we're introducing quite a lot of touch points between us asking them to do something and almost managing their work to make sure it gets done. And if we're then managing the work of a lot of different people in terms of setting their due dates, I can see that getting quite out of hand just because there'll be a lot of them.
What about if it was quite sort of like we... Sorry, what about if we just had like a 2-week fixed or 1 week fixed or something on the initial when they're created and assigned, and then at that point the people who are responsible for it can set a due date and kind of, you know, but the first one is just fixed at a week.
So we set that once a capacity alert has been raised, people have 1 week to triage it.
Yeah, it's got it, and then humans can look at it like a responsible human being who knows that area and say, you know, this is very urgent and we need to get it done by next week, and then it's on them to actually update the due date. Or alternatively, it's like, nah, that's like, you know, not a big issue, we're going to extend that out for 3 months or something.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sean.
One thing. Sorry, yeah, but one thing I would say on that is that's also a good thing to bring to the meeting. Is like, you know, we had due dates on these issues where we were expecting people to have triaged them, but they haven't. So like, you know, let's make a bit more noise about this. And the second thing I was going to say, Rachel, is like, I don't think the due dates has a huge amount of overhead. It's just more that like, that's the mechanism we use ourselves to check in on these things, right? Because otherwise, like, how do we know what we should be checking in on? Do we check in on everything every week? I think if we're bumping the due date or setting the due date to the right thing when we look at the issue, then we don't need to look at it again as often.
Until
I see what you're saying.
Then you know what you need to look at when
the
engineering allocation comes around.
Okay, well, we can give that some thought. I think there are a couple of different ways to do the due date stuff, but I think using one is good. We just have to figure out what points we use it and like how to use it specifically. So. Cool. Is there anything else anyone would like to demo today? Cool. Well, in that case, I hope that you all have a good rest of your day, and yeah, we'll catch up with you another time.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.